cowboy boots on, those 6-shooters, and I went walking up the trail. And I remember that I had forgotten that it had rained. And as I walked, I got stuck in the mud, and my little boots began to sink and sink and sink. And I was in trouble. And I remember not knowing what to do. I couldn't move my feet. And so I cried to my dad, "Dad, help!" And so thankfully my dad came and he grabbed me and he lifted me up out of my boots and set me on dry ground. And I was thinking about how that can be with life. So many of us seem stuck in so many places in life, right? But I was thinking it doesn't need to be that way in our spiritual life. But sometimes we feel like we're stuck. Maybe we've been part of the church or part of the faith for a long time and it just seems like we're not getting anywhere. Or maybe we're new to the faith and we want to know what's next. How can I move forward? How can I get down this journey with Jesus? And no matter the case, if you feel stuck or if you're stagnant or whatever, we don't want you to stay there. We want to help you to move along the path and to grow in your relationship with Jesus, to grow longer and deeper and to have a good way forward.
So, ta-da! Introducing Disciple Apprentice Pathway. From guest to maturing disciple, this is a guide to help you identify where you are on your faith journey. Then you turn it over, and you'll find opportunities to get moving on down the path. Jesus promises that when we move, He will move with us.
So, as we often say, God is for you, God is not against you, and we want to play a role in helping you to embrace that truth and to live it out in grace and in excitement. So let's go. So good morning, Glory.
Good morning.
Now, I wanted you to see that again. Actually, it makes me cringe a little bit to look at myself on the screen. Diane's great, but I'm like, eee. But I wanted you to see that again because what we're about is real faith in a real God for real people. And that's who we are. And this pathway is a way, as we talked about, to help us to move along with Jesus to a new place, a deeper place, a further along place where we want to get. And so you're going to be hearing more about this because this is kind of one of the core goals of our congregation moving forward. We really think this is an important emphasis, and so you'll hear us talk about this often to the point where we have more of those multicolored papers as we gave out last Sunday. We've got more of them over here. You'll see them in different places in the building, replicated up on the walls. We really want to help you to get moving. And so again, you're going to hear more about this in subsequent weeks about how you can take some next steps. But don't let us slow you down. If you're ready to move, talk with me, talk with Pastor Diane, talk with somebody who you trust and maybe you're getting to know here in the faith. We'll get you and all of us moving forward into the future. So I wanted you to see that again. I have a friend who wrote a book once, and it was about church security of all things. And after he wrote it, he was ready to write a book about something else. It was about like a devotional thing, which seemed 180 degrees from that. He said, I want to write this book because once you write a book, you think you can write another one. So I had to think about it. We've made a video. So maybe we'll make it, like a rap video or something, I'm thinking, Got Jay-Z working with us, Lil Wayne, or Wheezy, they call him. And I was thinking I was a little wheezy last night, actually. I had trouble sleeping last night. Anyway, so I digress. But point is, we want you to understand that this is a real God, a real life, with real people. And so as Jeff was sharing that scripture this morning, we hear a story like that, we might think, wow, that's real life and real people and a real God, and how does that? That sounds amazing. And we have all these stories in the Bible about all these people, and I think sometimes we are tempted to forget that these were real people. In a situation of life where all of a sudden Jesus shows up in their life and they're all trying to make sense of it and to know what to do with it. And on that occasion that Jeff was reading in John's gospel account, there they are on the side of the hill. They've been listening to Jesus. They have been captivated by what he's teaching. How far they're willing to journey with him down the path, we don't know. But on that day they were there and they had some very real needs. And the very real need was they were hungry. And so as this story is told, Jesus is challenging Philip because the disciples, the apostles, the 12, what they see is this insurmountable problem and they don't know what to do about it. they see this and they're thinking, wow, we got a lot of people here. This is just 5,000 guys plus all the women and children. I mean, we got a huge problem on our hands, and we don't know what to do. Jesus, send them home. They'll listen to you, Jesus. Send them home. And Jesus is challenging the disciples to say, there might be another way. These circumstances are such that God might have a different plan for what to do. Philip, will you trust me to provide the answer? And in fact, will you trust that the answer is here waiting? It's a huge challenge I think all of us live in. I don't know if you remember a couple weeks ago when I was sharing about Jesus being in the boat asleep and the disciples are with him and they're out on the water and the storm comes up and the waves are tossing them around and they're terrified. They think they're going to die. And one of the things that we often forget in that story is what the disciples had forgotten in that story, and that was in the midst of the storm, Jesus was with them. And how easy it can be to forget that. Jesus was there the whole time. There's a story in Luke's Gospel, chapter 24. It's after the crucifixion when Jesus is recounted, and there are disciples that are walking back to this town called Emmaus. And they're remembering all the events that have taken place in Jerusalem. And they were horrific events. Jesus, their leader, had been crucified in a gruesome way on the cross. There's no way to clean it up. I mean, we wear them on pendants around our necks. There's nothing clean. There's nothing glamorous about a crucified body. But that was Jesus' body. They're walking away toward this town talking about what has happened. And suddenly this stranger shows up and begins to talk about the events. And they were recounting them. And this amazing conversation happens. You see, it's Jesus that's shown up, but they don't know it's Jesus. And so they get to the place where they're going to stay. They invite this stranger to hang with them a little bit. They begin to have a meal together. And suddenly their eyes are open and they realize it's Jesus in their midst. Jesus had been with them the whole time. And as they recount it, they say, didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked? They didn't know he was there, but he was there the whole time. And here on this day, it looks like there's this insurmountable problem of 5,000 plus people needing to be fed. And there is Jesus in their midst. Sometimes it seems like it is all so big. And we wonder, God, where are you in the circumstances of my life? Are you only taking care of the other people? Are you only taking care of the big picture things? Are you only taking care of the celebrities? We inaugurated a president and a vice president. We think, well, God, we hope you're with them. They're important people, but just look at my life. What about me? And I stand before you today to remind you, to tell you that God is with you in the midst of your need. Now we might say, well, that's all well and good. Jesus was there with them physically in all of those cases. We don't got that. But remember what Paul was talking about last Sunday? He was talking about that great commission where Jesus says, go. Do you remember what was at the very end of that passage, at the very end of Matthew's gospel account? He says, here's what Jesus says. He says, lo, I am with you always until the end of the age. Jesus has given us, he has given you his word that he will be with you to the end and beyond. And what did Jesus do when he had been crucified and then appeared to the disciples? Their minds are blown because here's Jesus walking around. They watched him die on the cross, and yet here he is. He's not doing anything he had to say he would do. But it was kind of hard to believe that he would do what he would do, right? That he would show up, that he would live, that he would conquer the grave. But he did. And what did he say? I'm going to ascend. I'm going to go into heaven. But here's what I want you to remember. I'm going to send God's Spirit upon you. I'm going to send the Holy Spirit to be with you. You will not be alone. That Spirit is going to come. If you will wait, if you watch, I will send my Spirit. It will come upon you. And what does that Spirit do? But it empowers ministry. It empowers hope. It comes within us to encourage us and to comfort us. Oh, we have not been left alone. And my word to you today is to remember that even in your circumstances, God is present. It's easy to forget that, though, isn't it? When it's really hard, and when it's really difficult, and it seems like no one can understand you, when maybe it feels like no one wants to understand you, when it seems like amazing, how could a loving God allow this to happen in my life? You see, one of the challenges is for us to see things from God's perspective as best we can. That's what Jesus was inviting Philip to do on that day when they needed to feed 5,000 people. He was trying to help Philip to say, look at this from God's perspective. But I grant you that's not the easiest thing to do. So how do we work through this? How do we believe that God works in the ordinary to bring the extraordinary about? Because that's what all these stories are about, really. These are just real people, real life, and all of a sudden God does something incredible and amazing. Maybe people have waited for a long time for God to do something, and on a particular day, God acts. What was true for them is true for you and for me. Now, I don't know how long you've been a part of the faith, and some of you, this may be the first time you've ever been in a Christian worship experience, and we're here gathered together and trying to make sense of all of this. You know, one of the reasons we have this disciple pathway is because this isn't all there is to being a follower of Jesus, right? It's great to come and worship God and to hear great music and to pray and to be with other people. It's an awesome experience, but it's not just these moments that we're invited to follow Jesus, but every moment. So even those hard moments, even those difficult moments. I don't know how long you've been a follower of Jesus. Again, maybe this is your first time ever in a setting like this. Some of you may have heard some of the stories in the Bible growing up. You might be aware of things like Noah and the ark, Adam and Eve. Maybe even if you haven't been, you've heard some of those stories. Maybe you've heard the story about David and Goliath. It's a great story because it's the kind of underdog story that we Americans love to hear, right? Little David, the shepherd boy, Goliath, the giant. Now, if you want to hear the full story of it, I invite you to look in the Bible. You can do that online, or if you've got a hard copy of it, you can look it up. 1 Samuel chapter 17 tells the story about David and Goliath in the Old Testament. All right, now I'm going to give you a Snowed version, Tom Snowed version of it, paraphrase. So here's the thing. Goliath is a Philistine, and he's this giant of a man. He's a warrior of great renown, and he and his armies of the Philistines are on one side of the valley. Then on this side of the valley, there are the Israelites, and Saul is their king. And it's kind of a back and forth taunting match because Saul walks out with all his armor and his sword and his bronze mail and everything, head to toe. He's got a servant that goes ahead of him carrying a shield. He's a massive man. Some have him as probably being 6'9". Others have it that he probably was over 9 feet tall. I mean, the dude, by any standards, is a big dude, and he's huge. And so he's coming out and he's taunting God's people, the army of Israel, every day, saying, come on, you want this? And the thing is, nobody wants it, because he's terrifying. He's huge. He's a mountain of a man. He's a large human being. So the armies of Israel don't know what to do. They're thinking, well, you know, we ought to do something about this, but we don't really know what to do about this. And Saul, the king, is at the end of his rope. Meanwhile, David, the shepherd boy, is tending his dad's sheep and the family flock and everything, doing what he does. And his dad says, well, son, here's what I need you to do. I need you to take some cheese and other things up to the front lines to your brother and deliver them some food. So David's like, okay, Dad. So he does that. He's got the cheese and everything. He drops it off, and he's like, again, my version, you know, what's up? What's going on? It's like, well, this giant keeps taunting us, and we're just standing here. And there's something that in young David's mind just clicks. He's like, are you kidding me? You're letting this giant taunt the Lord's army? Now, in our mind, it's kind of an absurd thing because it's like this, what some might call pejoratively, this pipsqueak boy is talking a big game. He's insulting his brothers. His brothers want him to go back home. Like, dude, get out of here. Go tend the sheep. But somehow Saul catches wind. The king catches wind of this David who's come. And so he's at the end of his rope. He'll try anything, right? So he's like, okay, bring that boy here. I want to talk to him. David lays it out. Basically, I'm going to do something about this. Saul's like, okay. I mean, he has no options anymore, right? So he gives David his armor. Now, mind you, this is not a large person, this David, and he gets the armor of Saul. He tries to put it on. He can't move in it. You see, because David's skill is in speed, and stealth, and agility. So, on the day, the giant comes out ready for close-in combat. mountain of a man, this warrior. And here's David. He takes his sling. He finds 5 smooth stones. And he comes out to meet the giant, who, by the way, is highly insulted that this little pipsqueak would come out and try to challenge him. This is the best you got, Israel? You send a boy out to me to fight with sticks like I'm a dog? But David. See, this young man has fought off bears and lions from attacking the sheep. He knows what he's doing, and he knows how to handle a sling. My understanding is there have been ballistic experts that have studied this whole sling thing, and in the warfare of the time, those slingers were an important part of the army. They were kind of the agile people. You had the heavy infantry, you had the cavalry, and you had the projectile warriors. These folks could whip that sling around, and they could send a stone at from 35 meters out. They could send a stone flying 34 meters per second with accuracy. You see, the force of that, if in fact that's what David did, the force of that was enough to penetrate a human being's skull and to render them either unconscious or dead. It's not so far-fetched as you would think. You see, the Goliath, the giant, is ready for the close-in combat that he was used to. Oh! But there was another way to tame and to tackle this giant. And David found it. And the giant was slain on that day. It wasn't a good day for the giant, but it was a great day for David and the armies of Israel. When we look at that story, it's such a prototypical story because it's the underdog, right? It's the little guy against the big guy. It's the little team that can't do it. It's like the Hoosiers all in front of us, right? The little high school in Indiana in the 50s playing the big city school and knocking them off at Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. We love stories like that, but they're not as implausible as you think. There are a lot of rational reasons why that could happen. And God helped it to happen that day. Now, some people speculate that really Goliath had some other things going on. When I was a boy, we used to listen on the radio. Back in the day when you listened to the radio, like just on AM radio, did you know that AM radio exists? That used to be all we had. And we'd take these long trips and we'd listen to Paul Harvey tell these great stories. And always at the last break of the story, he'd say it and he'd say, come back on after the commercial and say, and now for the rest of the story. And fill you in on all the things that were left hanging and tied up. And you'd be like, whoa, what a story. How's that happen? And it has been thought that maybe Goliath was a mountain of a man because he had a pituitary problem. Maybe a tumor on his pituitary gland that created a hormone kind of out of control thing, and that he grew into this huge proportions that were amazing and beyond imagination, and it made him slow and cumbersome. It affected his eyesight perhaps, and could be. The thing is, there's often more to the story than we know, isn't there? And that's how it is with God and your life. Sometimes there's more to the story than you know that's happening. Sometimes when you look at the circumstances of your life, whatever the situation is, good or bad, you see a glimpse of it, you get a piece of it, you've got one perspective of it. The challenge is, well, we try to look at things from God's perspective. You see, a few weeks ago, we talked about hearing God speak to us through the Bible. And the Bible, just like today, has all kinds of teachings and stories that can help us learn how to navigate life. God will speak to you. You want to hear God's voice? Then you begin to read your Bible, and there's going to be times where you get stuck on something, and that's the place where God wants to say something into your life. We also said that God speaks to us through prayer. And if you will take the challenge to be a person of prayer and begin to listen, not only to and not just speak to God, but listen, you will begin to hear God speak back into your life, things that you need to know. And just like with the Bible, with prayer, if you make a note of things and you write them down, God will begin to answer things for you. You'll be able to see the movement of God in your life. And today, I want to tell you, I want to affirm for you that God can speak in the circumstances of your life. And sometimes what he's inviting us to do is just to step back and to trust that he's at work. Sometimes we don't have it all figured out. Jesus is asking Philip and the disciples to trust that in this insurmountable problem of feeding thousands of people, God's got this. On the face of it, it looks like an impossible thing. On the storm on the sea, it looks like this boat's going to break up at any moment, but there is Jesus in the midst of that to calm the sea. They had to go through the storm for a while before Jesus calmed the sea. This is how life can be. David and Goliath seems like a story of the little guy against the big guy who has this upset victory, but really it's a matter of God working through the ways that God works, in sometimes inexplicable, amazing ways to bring about what God wants to bring about. Can we begin to see things from God's perspective? You see, if you believe that God can speak to you through the circumstances of your life, then you can begin to look at your life and you can begin to see patterns and you can begin to see the places where God has made this happen and this happen and this happen so that it all comes together. Now, you might be saying, well, this is all cool because these are all people in the Bible. I'm not really sure if I believe all of that anyway, so you're not really convincing me, Tom. And I'm not here to convince you. I'm just here to point to the kingdom things that God makes possible. I'm here to point to the accessibility of God's kingdom now. But I do want to tell you a personal story. Now, if I tell you the story, you might think, well, that ain't such a big deal. I mean, there's Goliath, and there's David, and then there's Tom's story. But, Tom's story is Tom's story. It's kind of those little things. Now, let me preface my little story by saying I don't believe that God expects every human being to have straight teeth. But we had a family situation several years ago, and it was that our oldest son, Eli, needed braces. He got his dad's teeth, and it wasn't good. So he needed some help. And so we wanted to get him braces, and it wasn't just cosmetic things. It was really a health thing. He needed to have them. And we really didn't know what to do about it because we didn't have any money to do that. Anybody put braces on? Yeah. Not too many discounts on that these days. And this was back in the day, a few years ago, we didn't really know what we were going to do. This is the kind of thing that's happened to us more than once. And so we committed. We're going to hopefully get these braces for him. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to trust. And so put things in motion for Eli to get braces. Now, meanwhile, one day, Sandra and I were taking a walk along a country road, as we were known to do, and we were walking in the middle of the road, and my neighbor had a dog, big old dog, that was a pretty noisy dog, barking away. Now, I love dogs. I'm not afraid of dogs. And oftentimes, even a barky dog, I'll come and I'll put my hand out, and just kind of let him get used to me and everything, and see that I'm good. No problem. Well, on this day, we're just walking, carrying on. Undoubtedly, I was saying something profound to Sandra, as we were walking. This dog's yapping and barking along, and all of a sudden, it bites me. Now, I was shocked, because I'd never been bitten by a dog. Dogs are my friend. And this dog bit me. This is where I wish we had a soundtrack thing, that bite sound you hear on cartoons. Like, bite! And I'm like, look at the dog, it's like he bit me. I'm like, look, Hassan, the dog bit me! Could you believe the dog bit me? No, I can't believe it. Yeah, he bit me. Had a hole in my pants. So I go up to the neighbor who owned the dog, and I said, I just want to let you know your dog bit me. Oh, I'm so sorry. I know, it's okay. So we get back to the house, and I check it out, and I realize, and this was an odd thing, dogs don't typically bite you. Maybe they did. But anyway, this dog bit me. I looked, it broke the skin. I was bleeding. And it's been a while since I had tetanus shot, so I better go. So I go get it cleaned up and everything. Kind of hurt. So I probably milked it for all I could. I was walking like this, walking home, Sandra, could you go get me something to drink? I don't know if I did that anyway. But it hurt. So, to make a long story short, we, did everything that we were supposed to do, got it checked out, cleaned up, and everything like that. Kind of forgot all about it until we got a phone call from a neighbor's insurance company. Mr. Snowden, how are you? I'm fine. It's like, why are you calling me? We're the insurance carriers for, and we understand that you were bit by it. Yeah, well, how are you doing? Well, I'm fine. Are you sure? Yes. Well, that must have been a very traumatic thing. I'm starting to think, well, I kind of forgot all about it. Like, well, I guess. She goes, well, we want to give you some money for your hurt or whatever. I forget the phrasing. I was like, really? This had never occurred to me. I'm like, now this might sound kind of a silly thing to say. I said, no, that's not necessary. And she's like, well, no, that's a really traumatic thing. I think you should, how's so-and-so $1,000 sound? I'm like, yeah. Because it was just about the exact amount of money we needed for the braces. So I said, okay. And was shocked that Eli's braces got paid for because I took one for the team. Now, I am not saying that God sent the dog from hell to bite my leg. I'm not saying that. It's the only time in my life I've ever been bitten by one. I love dogs. Dogs are awesome. Love them. And but the circumstances of life were like, are you kidding me? And Sandra and I looked at each other because this has happened in our lives more than once, where we didn't know how we were going to pay something. We didn't know how we were going to do something. We didn't know how the pieces were going to fall into place. And somehow, in the amazing tapestry of life, things were orchestrated and things fell into place from time immemorial, ways that we could have never imagined. And all of a sudden, she and I could say, the Lord, we like to say it in Shakespearean ways, the Lord doth provide. God is at work in the circumstances of life. Sometimes in the moment, sometimes in the hardship, sometimes in the pain of it, we can't see it, but God is at work. The question is, will you and I trust a loving God enough to believe that God is at work in ways that we can't necessarily see, but that God is at work in ways that will be for our benefit? There was a guy named Stephen who was one of the disciples of Jesus. Can you give me about 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Thank you. This guy named Stephen was a believer in Jesus. He was one that the church blessed early on. This is in the Acts of the Apostles in the Bible, New Testament, chapter 6. He was one of the people that was set apart to care for the widows in their need. And so Stephen's doing this, but apparently Stephen was a man of such depth and such spirit that he also had the gift to be able to tell people about Jesus. And one day he begins to tell people about Jesus. There's a dispute amongst some believers and non-believers, and it's going on and on and on and on. And Stephen begins to recount the history of Israel, and then he launches a zinger that enraged the non-believing people in Jesus. And so they decide that they're going to throw stones at him and kill him. And so there he is, at the time, the man we now know as the Apostle Paul, who had been called Saul at the time, presided over the stoning of Stephen to death. And so Stephen is sharing about Jesus as his life is ebbing away from him. And he looks to the sky and he sees Jesus at the right hand of God. And he asks Jesus to forgive those who are doing this to him. And he believes and understands that he is not lost, but he is found. He's been found by Jesus. He has this faith that he knows that's going to take him into eternity, that eternity is not just someday, but it begins that day. And he realized that all would be okay. And even though his earthly life was going away, he still talked Jesus. And he died. But what happened was, after he died, this persecution began, and it made people leave the city of Jerusalem, and they began to talk about Jesus wherever they went. It was an amazing way that God's good news spread. Now, I don't believe that God intentionally wanted Stephen to die. I don't believe that God set Stephen up to be killed. I believe that God wept when Stephen was killed because of the brokenness of the world and the evil intent that people can have. But on that day, God took this tragic thing and he made something of it. He used that to propel people to go share about Jesus in other places. And who knows, but what it started in the persecutor of the church, Saul, as he watched Stephen talk about Jesus that day. Who knows what that might have begun in his heart that resulted in later a man becoming one of the greatest teachers and followers of Jesus who's ever lived. Sometimes our circumstances, we just don't see it all. But can we begin to trust and to see things from God's perspective? Can we read God's word, and can we be people of prayer, and can we be together with other believers to encourage one another and help each other to see that we have not been forgotten, that God is at work in the circumstances of our lives, even though we might feel very alone and very forgotten and very misunderstood, that God is doing something, that God has a plan, that there is going to be fruit born of this situation, good or bad. You see, one of the things that we talk about as a staff often is white noise. You know how some of you run a fan at night so you can sleep, even in the wintertime? You just like to have that hum in the background. Sometimes some of the things that we say when we stand up here in front of, like, I always say, morning glory, that can become white noise. You don't hear it anymore. Or some of the things that we say can be not heard. And one of the things I like to say to you is that God is for you. God is not against you. And it could be a white noise day where that just kind of goes by. But I'm telling you, God is for you. God is not against you. And God is at work in the circumstances of your life. The resource, with a capital R, the perfect source of all things, is in our midst, is in your midst, is in your home, He's in your car, He's in your workplace, He's in your relationships if you let Him be there. God is for you. God is not against you, and He's making a way, and He's inviting you to trust Him to help you to understand the circumstances of your life. The question becomes, will we listen? And will we trust? And I challenge you to watch for God, to make note of things that are revealed to you in prayer, to make note of the things that you find in the Bible that pique your interest. And if you make a note of those, you're going to begin to see this amazing account of the ways that God has been working in your life. You'll be able to see that God is a real God for real life and for real people. The challenge for us becomes, will we so live our lives and adjust our lives so that we can be faithful and know what it means to be really alive? May it be. Will you pray with me? Holy God, we thank you for your love for us that is never ending. Oh, Lord, we come here today. Some of us are really, really tired. Some of us have stuff that's weighing on us so heavily that we don't know what to do. Mindful of the fact, too, Lord, that for some of us, this has been the best day we've ever had in life so far. It is awesome. Maybe we find ourselves somewhere in between. Whatever it is, Lord, whatever the circumstances of life are today, help us to believe that you are in them, that you are at work for us, that you are at work with us, and that you love us with an unending, forgiving love. Lord, Jesus came to show us the kingdom, your domain, and it is still your domain. This is your world. Yes, there's brokenness. Yes, there's hurt. Yes, there's struggle. But Lord, this is your world. Help us to claim our place in your world. Help us to believe that this is your world. Bring healing. Lord, if you could bring healing to hurting bodies, mind, soul, and spirit. Oh, Lord, we'd be loving that. But even when we're waiting and we're watching, help us to trust that you are at work. Help us to begin to see things from your perspective and to move forward in faith. We pray this in Jesus' name.